Hello, I'm Peter Bentley, a Research Fellow at the L.H. Martin Institute. Today I'm talking with Ian Marshman, Honorary Fellow at the Melbourne Centre for the Study of Higher Education and also former Senior Vice Principal of the University of Melbourne. Ian, you spent more than a decade in your role as Senior Vice Principal at the University of Melbourne. What were your primary responsibilities?
Well, in lots of ways, I used to say jokingly that my role at the university was to do everything else that the Vice-Chancellor wasn't interested in. In the business sector, one would have called the job a Chief Operating Officer. And my major role was really around looking after the management of the university, focusing particularly on planning and budgeting and major projects and quality assurance programs.
And how have you seen this role change over the course of your experience at the University of Melbourne?
In a lot of ways, the roles varied very much dependent upon the particular interests of the Vice-Chancellor I've been working for at the time. Initially, I think a lot of my role was a lot more around program delivery. There was very much a dedicated and separate administration, and I was responsible for the leadership and management of that. Increasingly, in later time, my role has been around playing a strategic and advisory role to the Vice-Chancellor and other colleagues within the senior executive. So I've particularly focused on strategy and planning and particularly working on major university projects.
And have you seen your position become more central to decision making over time, or could you draw any conclusions from that?
I think the role changes as one gets older or matures in the role, or whatever one wants to call it. And increasingly, I became very much a custodian of the corporate memory of the university, and also I think was able to have a good understanding of rapport of what goes on in the academic divisions, and able to bring that into play in terms of help guiding some of my colleagues in terms of the leadership and management role that they played.
And next month you will be facilitating the L.H. Martin Institute's Leading the University Masterclass, and one of the overarching themes of this masterclass is the need for universities to be both mission-centred and market-smart. What do you see as the main challenges for achieving these dual goals?
I'm looking forward to participating in the workshop next month. I think some of the real challenges for universities is in actually really understanding the external environment in which they're operating and some of the changes that are occurring in that environment. Clearly, some of the most significant ones that occur to me are around the increasing importance of globalisation and the fact that universities are operating now in an increasingly smaller world globally, where the competition is international rather than national. Secondly, there's the whole challenge of digital disruption and the way in which technology is actually working within the higher education sector. And of course, particularly from an Australian perspective, there's always a challenge of declining and further declining levels of public funding and how to manage that. So the real challenge is to try and understand that environment. And then looking at one's own mission, I think the real challenge is to try and understand what skills and the areas of excellence that each institution has, and be able to work on those in responding to the market environment. I think increasingly we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years universities moving from a fairly normalised mission to one that's becoming increasingly differentiated, and I think that's the best way in which institutions can actually respond to the dynamics that are occurring in the marketplace.
Well, it's certainly important to be market smart when perhaps half of all the revenue would be coming in indirectly from non-public sources. What do you mean by differentiated missions, though, within the Australian sector?
Well, I think when one looks at 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, when strategic planning was first introduced into higher education, almost 37 universities at the time were all going to be internationally renowned research-based universities. Clearly it was a wonderful aspiration to have, but not one that necessarily fitted the circumstances of each university. But I think increasingly we're seeing now regional universities focusing on their strengths in terms of regional engagement. We're seeing the ATN network universities focusing a lot more on technology and the way in which they're engaging with students and industry. And the research-intensive universities, I think, have actually continued to try and strengthen their international standing as universities rather than operating exclusively within an Australian paradigm.
Yeah, well, those are good examples of how being market smart has influenced the shaping of the missions of universities. And even within the research mission, there's marketisation over competitive research funding and so forth. To take it down to perhaps a more micro level, what's your views on whether individual teaching programs ought to be covering their costs or responding directly to the market?
I think whether in the teaching and learning area, there's always been a big debate about whether courses should only be introduced if they can wash their face, if they can cover their costs and so on. I'm very much influenced by what occurred at Melbourne, in responding to that. I think we saw our mission very much as being a comprehensive university that seeks to cover as much as possible of the disciplines that that are on offer, and that we wanted to have breadth in that disciplinary offer, noting that not all those programs might actually attract large numbers of enrolments, but they were important for the Western tradition, that they continue. We particularly had debates in the past about physics, about classics, and a very important discussion around performing and creative arts and the role that they played within universities. I think one of the things that we certainly understood is that if programs fit within our mission, it's really important that we continue to support them. But it's also important that those programs are also operate on an as business-like and professional way as possible. The fact that there may need to be cross-subsidised doesn't mean that they don't need to operate in a professional way. So I've always thought that it's important that cross-subsidisation is a very legitimate way of running teaching and learning programs, but the level of cross-subsidisation and the need for that ought to be transparent.
Yes, transparency is a core issue when it comes to the way in which finances move around, both within universities and from the public to individual universities. Now, universities are still they're quite unique in their pursuit of disinterested research and teaching programs that promote long-term critical thinking amongst students. Now, how can universities maintain their disinterestedness in their research and teaching missions when the primary funders of these activities, the public and individual students, are really demanding impact and relevance directly to their career pathways or to the broader economy?
I agree it's a challenge. I see the need to work on two fronts. One is to ensure that is on the communication side, and that universities do have, both individually and collectively, I think, a responsibility to be able to communicate and demonstrate to the wider world, to those that fund us and the wider community that influence the funders, about the importance of basic research and the virtues that arise from that. If you take at Melbourne the example of cochlear implants, probably the most successful piece of research, applied research that the university's created, that did come out essentially out of the basic research, that was originally that gave rise to it, and it wouldn't have been possible without the strength of that basic disinterested research. On the other hand, I think internally the obligation of universities is actually to be able to set up funding models and vehicles into which academics are encouraged and provided the incentives and the rewards for actually undertaking basic research. So it's important to just creating an environment within a university in which that is recognised and through the reward system and so on as being a virtue in itself.
And financial sustainability is not restricted to the teaching and research programs of the university. The University of Melbourne over the past few years has been implementing the business improvement process, which has targeted the support and the professional staff members of this institution. What has been the main goals of this program?
Really, the main goals of the program was to look at the non-academic side of the university as an entity, and to look at ways in which we might be able to reconfigure the way we go about providing support for the academic mission of the university in a more systematic and coordinated way than traditionally a very devolved institution does, with 7 distinct academic entities which are fiercely autonomous and a central administration. So the objectives of this really were to create a better environment for students, a better environment in which staff could actually undertake their work, and to actually raise, I think, the standing and regard that we have for professional staff within the university. And in doing so, to be able to free up some significant level of resources which could go back into the academic mainstream.
Yeah, investing back into the academic heartland is one way of viewing it. But have you any views about whether the process has been successful, and how would you measure success on these sorts of processes?
I mean, I'm minded a little bit what Mao Zedong said about, when he was asked about what he thought about the French Revolution, and he answered, he said, it's too early to tell. I'm quite heartened with the progress that's being achieved. At the very heart of the business improvement program is a massive culture change, which is being supported by a major organisational change. And the fact that the university is staying the distance with a new Melbourne operating model, and that a number of really important process improvements are beginning to roll out and emerge, gives me a great level of encouragement and comfort that the major disruption that I had a part to play in some time ago is producing the dividends that we hope for it.
And taking you back to the early stages of that disruption, one would assume the university has considerable knowledge about its cost base and its revenue base and its mission, yet the university chose to use external consultants at quite a substantial cost to the university. What are the main benefits of using external consultants when making decisions about restructures?
The decision to undertake the business improvement program and bring in external consultants really was taken after a long series of internally led reforms which really got nowhere. And we exhausted a number of people who were very well intentioned, but we came up against some fundamental systemic problems. And so I really thought we needed to make this program and reform program a lot bigger and give it some real credibility. I was conscious that ever since the global financial crisis, a number of most of the corporate sector had actually undertaken major reviews of their cost base in the administrative areas, and I thought that University of Melbourne, although we're not a business, we do have to operate our administrative services in a business-like way, and we could learn from the best that was available externally to the university, and that might provide a greater level of comfort to the university that the approach we're taking was actually worthwhile undertaking.
And what advice might you have to others in similar situations when planning to use external consultants? What should they be aware of or beware of when seeking out advice from consultants?
I think a couple of pieces of advice. One is really be sure to make sure that you hire the right consultants that are right for this particular project. We undertook a major exhaustive selection process and brought a number of consulting firms onto campus and had a number of people across the university assess them before we chose the consulting firm we did. Secondly, I think, is to make sure that the university's own internal team is as good as and as large as the external consultant team, because most of the ideas and most of the knowledge which is going to occur in successive stages is going to be led by people from within the university, not by consultants. And thirdly is make sure the consultants stay the distance. Don't allow them just to write a report and, as they say, chuck the report over the fence and leave it to you to implement. Make sure that both financially and reputationally the consultants are locked into the success of the program for the longer term.
And drawing upon your breadth of experience as the Senior Vice Principal at this university, what advice would you have to someone who might be new to such a position, or someone who would aspire to become a Senior Vice Principal or Chief Operating Officer?
I think firstly to say it's a really great role. It's the best role I could ever envisage for myself, and so go for it and make the most of it. Secondly, I'd say make sure you really understand the business of the university, and it is an academic institution essentially, and it's the academics are the people who actually make the university what it is. So whether you're from a corporate background or whatever, make sure you understand the business of what the university is really all about. And thirdly, in the role you'll be tempted to undertake an enormous number of activities. It's better to concentrate on a few and really make progress in relation to some of them, rather than trying to take on everything.
Thanks very much for taking the time to talk with us today, and best of luck with the upcoming Leading the University Masterclass next month in Malaysia. Thanks.
Thank you.